The Dragon Queen left the palace for hours. When she returned, she saw the human janitor in her triplets' room, laughing, playing, covered in feathers from a pillow fight he should never have been part of. The sight froze her in the doorway. He was kneeling on the floor, surrounded by her daughters, who were shrieking with joy. Their wings fluttered. Their laughter echoed through the royal chamber. And for the first time in years, the queen felt something crack inside her chest. Not anger, but fear. Fear that her children had found something in this stranger that she could no longer give them. Fear that she had been replaced. Before we continue, if stories like this one move you, subscribe now so you don't miss what happens next. And if these long videos touch your heart, consider leaving a tiny tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Even $1 helps me keep studying, working, and still creating these stories for you. Thank you with love. The Celestian Royal Palace floated above the crystalline oceans of Drakkara Prime, suspended by ancient gravitational technology that hummed softly through its metallic bones. Its corridors were vast and cold, lined with bioluminescent panels that shifted from emerald to sapphire depending on the mood of the structure itself. Everything here was designed to remind its inhabitants of one truth. This was a place of power, of legacy, of blood that stretched back 10,000 years. And Ethan Cole did not belong. He knew it the moment he'd accepted the job. A human janitor on an alien world, hired through a desperate staffing agency that specialized in placing low-skill workers in high-security positions no one else wanted. The pay was decent, the isolation was absolute, and the contract was clear, clean, stay silent, and never, under any circumstance, interact with the royal family. Ethan had agreed without hesitation. He needed the work. He needed the distance. And after losing his daughter 2 years ago in a shuttle accident on Earth, he needed to be somewhere that didn't remind him of her laughter in every corner. But Drakkara Prime was not kind to grief. The palace staff treated him like a shadow. The Celestian guards watched him with unblinking golden eyes, their scaled hands always resting on the hilts of plasma blades. The other cleaners, mostly Grells and Thaxians, spoke in languages he didn't understand and avoided him during meal breaks. He ate alone. He worked alone. He lived in a small quarters module attached to the lower service wing, where the hum of the engines drowned out everything else. For 3 months, Ethan kept his head down. He scrubbed floors that gleamed like mirrors. He polished viewport glass that overlooked alien skies filled with 3 moons. He emptied waste systems, restocked supply closets, and repaired broken paneling in hallways where no one ever thanked him. And he was fine with that, until the day he heard the crying. It was soft at first, barely audible over the hum of the filtration systems. Ethan had been replacing a burnt-out light panel in one of the residential corridors when he heard it. A child's voice, muffled, broken. He froze, tool in hand, listening. The sound came again, closer this time. Ethan looked down the hallway. It was empty, but one of the doors, a large one, marked with a royal crest, was slightly ajar. He should have walked away. He should have followed protocol. But the sound of that crying child pulled at something deep inside him, something he thought he'd buried with his daughter. He set down his tools and moved toward the door. Inside, the room was bright and chaotic. Toys were scattered across the floor, floating orbs, holographic puzzles, plush creatures from a dozen different worlds. The walls were painted in soft pastels, and the beds were small, clearly meant for children. And sitting on the floor, alone, was a little girl. She had green skin and curly red hair, and small purple wings folded against her back. Her face was streaked with tears, and she was clutching a broken toy, a small mechanical bird that sparked weakly in her hands. Ethan's breath caught. She looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she spoke, her voice trembling. Please don't tell Mama I broke it, she whispered. Ethan knelt slowly, keeping his hands visible. I won't, he said softly. Can I see it? She hesitated, then held out the toy. Ethan took it carefully, examining the damage. One of the wings had snapped off, and the internal wiring was frayed. But it was fixable. He reached into his tool belt and pulled out a micro-welder. The little girl watched in silence as he worked, her tears drying on her cheeks. 3 minutes later, the bird chirped, flapped its wings, and flew in a small circle around the room. The girl gasped, her face lighting up. You fixed it, she cried. Ethan smiled. Good as new. She hugged the toy to her chest, then looked up at him with something close to wonder. What's your name? She asked. Ethan, he said. What's yours? Lyra, she said. Then she tilted her head. Are you a magician? Ethan chuckled. No, just a janitor. What's a janitor? Someone who fixes things that break, he said, and cleans up messes. Lyra nodded seriously. We make a lot of messes. We? Before she could answer, 2 more little girls burst into the room, identical in every way except for the colors of their dresses. One wore purple, the other teal. They stopped when they saw Ethan. Who are you? The one in purple demanded. He fixed Lyra's bird, Lyra said excitedly. The girl in teal stepped closer, studying him with sharp, curious eyes. You're human, she said. I am, Ethan replied. Mama says humans are weak, the girl in purple said. Kira, Lyra hissed. Kira shrugged. She did. Ethan stood slowly, brushing off his knees. Your mama's probably right, he said calmly. Humans break easy. The girl in teal frowned. Then why are you here? Because someone has to clean up, Ethan said, even in a palace. The 3 girls stared at him in silence. Then Kira grinned. Can you fix my puzzle box? She asked, pulling a tangled mess of glowing wires from under her bed. Ethan glanced at the door. He should leave. He should walk away before someone found him here. But the way they were looking at him, like he was something other than invisible, made him stay. Let me see it, he said. And that was how it started. Every day after his shift, Ethan would find an excuse to pass by their wing of the palace. Sometimes he'd fix a toy. Sometimes he'd answer a question. Sometimes he'd just sit on the floor and listen while they told him stories about their lessons, their guards, their mother the queen, who was always busy and always tired. They never asked him to stay, but they never told him to leave. And slowly, carefully, Ethan let himself feel something he thought he'd lost forever. He let himself care. But while the triplets laughed and played, the palace staff began to notice. And in the shadows, whispers began to spread. Whispers about the human janitor who had broken the most sacred rule of all. It started with a question. Do human kids play games? Lyra asked one evening, sitting cross-legged on her bed while Ethan repaired a broken data tablet. Ethan glanced up. Of course they do. What kind of games? Saris asked, the quietest of the 3, her teal dress pooling around her as she sat beside her sister. Ethan thought for a moment, then smiled. All kinds. Tag, hide and seek, pillow fights. Kira's eyes widened. What's a pillow fight? Ethan laughed. You don't know what a pillow fight is? All 3 girls shook their heads. Ethan set down the tablet and picked up one of the large, soft pillows from Lyra's bed. He held it up like a sword. It's a battle, he said, his voice mock serious. A war of fluff and feathers. The goal is to hit your opponent with a pillow before they hit you. Last one standing wins. The girls stared at him, then Kira's face split into a wicked grin. Show us, she demanded. I don't think, Ethan began. But before he could finish, Kira grabbed a pillow and swung it at him with surprising force. It hit him square in the chest. Ethan staggered back, laughing. Okay, okay. You want a fight? You got one. He grabbed another pillow and gently swung it toward Ceres, who squealed and ducked. Lyra dove off her bed, grabbed her own pillow and launched herself at Ethan with a battle cry that echoed through the room. For the next 10 minutes, the royal bedroom became a battlefield. Feathers exploded into the air as pillows collided. The girls shrieked with laughter, their wings fluttering as they dodged and struck. Ethan moved carefully, making sure every hit was soft, every swing exaggerated. He let them win, let them feel strong, let them be children in a way they rarely were. Kira climbed onto her bed and leapt at him like a tiny dragon, pillow raised high. Ethan caught her mid-air, spun her around and set her down gently as she giggled uncontrollably. Again, again, Lyra shouted, swinging her pillow wildly. Ceres, normally so reserved, was laughing so hard she could barely stand. Ethan knelt on the floor, surrounded by feathers, and held up his hands in surrender. "I give up," he said, grinning. "You win." The girls cheered, throwing their pillows into the air. And then the door opened. The laughter stopped. Ethan turned, still kneeling, still holding a pillow. And there, standing in the doorway, was Queen Verelia. She was tall and regal, her green skin glowing faintly in the soft light of the room. Her wings, massive and elegant, fading from emerald to gold, were folded tightly against her back. Her long red hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes, sharp, intelligent and utterly stunned, were fixed on Ethan. She was wearing a formal gown, clearly just returned from some state function. Her expression was frozen somewhere between shock and disbelief. Ethan's heart stopped. The triplets froze, their eyes wide. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Verelia's gaze shifted from Ethan to her daughters, then to the feathers floating through the air, then back to Ethan. "What?" she said slowly, her voice dangerously calm. "Is happening here?" Ethan stood quickly, dropping the pillow. "Your Majesty, I can explain." "Mama, we were just playing," Lyra blurted out, stepping in front of Ethan. "He was teaching us a human game," Kira added. Ceres said nothing, but she moved closer to Ethan, her small hand gripping the edge of his uniform. Verelia's eyes flickered to her daughters, then back to Ethan. Her jaw tightened. "You," she said, her voice like ice, "are a janitor." "Yes, Your Majesty," Ethan said quietly. "You clean floors, you maintain equipment. You do not." She stepped into the room, her presence filling the space. "Enter the private chambers of the royal family. You do not play with my children. You do not." Her voice cracked slightly. "You do not make them love you." The last sentence hung in the air like a blade. Ethan's throat tightened. "I never meant to." "Get out," Verelia said. "Mama, no," Lyra cried. "Please," Kira added, her voice desperate. Verelia closed her eyes, her hands trembling. "Girls, go to the study wing, now." "But," Ceres began. "Now," Verelia repeated, her voice breaking. The triplets hesitated, looking between their mother and Ethan. Then, slowly, reluctantly, they left the room, their wings drooping. When the door closed, Verelia turned to Ethan. Her eyes were wet. "You have no idea what you've done," she whispered. "I'm sorry," Ethan said. "I didn't mean to overstep, They needed someone, and I needed them too." Verelia's breath hitched. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't see how they light up when you're near? You think I don't hear them ask for you every night?" Ethan said nothing. "I am their mother," Verelia continued, her voice shaking. "I am their queen. I have given them everything, and yet..." She looked away. "Yet they would rather be with you." "That's not true," Ethan said softly. "It is," Verelia whispered, "and it terrifies me." She turned toward the door, her wings trembling. "You're dismissed," she said. Pack your things, you'll be reassigned by morning. Ethan's chest tightened. Your Majesty, please. But Virelia was already gone. And as the door closed behind her, Ethan stood alone in a room full of feathers, realizing that he had just lost the only thing that had made him feel whole again. But in the silence that followed, a small voice echoed from the hallway. A voice that would change everything. Virelia did not sleep that night. She stood in her private observatory, high above the palace, staring out at the 3 moons of Dracara Prime as they drifted across the violet sky. The chamber was silent, except for the faint hum of the gravitational stabilizers and the soft rustle of her gown as she shifted her weight. Her hands gripped the edge of the observation platform, her claws pressing into the smooth metal. She should have felt victorious. She had removed the human. She had protected her daughters from an inappropriate attachment. She had done what any mother, any queen, would do. So why did it feel like she had made a terrible mistake? Behind her, the door hissed open. "You summoned me, Your Majesty." Virelia didn't turn. "Close the door, Tharion." The head of palace security stepped inside, his scaled armor gleaming in the pale moonlight. He was a draconite like her, though his wings were grey and battle-scarred. His expression was unreadable. "I want a full report on the human janitor," Virelia said. "Everything. His background, his clearance, his interactions with my daughters." Tharion hesitated. "Your Majesty, I've already reviewed everything," Virelia repeated, her voice sharp. "I want to know how this happened." Tharion inclined his head. "Of course." He pulled a data slate from his belt and handed it to her. Virelia took it, her eyes scanning the file. Name, Ethan Cole Species, human age, 34 standard years employment, status, contract maintenance worker, low clearance background, former systems engineer, Earth-based, widowed, 1 child, deceased. Virelia's breath caught. She scrolled further. The file included incident reports, time logs, and surveillance footage. She watched, frame by frame, as Ethan repaired toys, answered questions, sat on the floor with her daughters. She saw the way they looked at him, the way they laughed. And she saw something else. She saw the way Ethan looked at them. Not with ambition, not with calculation, but with grief. "He lost a daughter," Virelia whispered. "Yes," Tharion said quietly. 2 years ago. Shuttle accident. He was off-world when it happened." Virelia's claws dug into the data slate. "He's been alone ever since," Tharion continued. "No family, no ties, just work." Virelia closed her eyes. "And my daughters gave him something to care about again." "It appears so," Tharion said carefully. Virelia handed the slate back to him and turned toward the viewport. Her reflection stared back at her. A queen, a mother, a woman who had spent 10 years balancing power and love and never quite succeeding at either. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Tharion stepped closer. "May I speak freely, Your Majesty?" "Always." "You are not angry at the human," Tharion said. "You're angry at yourself." Virelia's wings tensed. "You've been ruling alone for 5 years," Tharion continued, "raising 3 children alone, negotiating treaties, managing the council, defending your claim to the throne. You've done everything right, but you can't be in 2 places at once, and your daughters have felt your absence." "I know that," Virelia said, her voice breaking. "I know I'm failing them." "You're not failing them," Tharion said firmly. "You're surviving. But they need more than survival. They need joy. And somehow this human gave them that." Virelia's hands trembled. "He's nobody. A janitor. A human. The council will. They'll destroy him if they find out. They'll destroy me." "Then don't tell them," Tharion said. Virelia turned sharply. "What?" "Let him stay," Tharion said, quietly. "Officially, he remains a janitor. Unofficially, he becomes what your daughters need. You're suggesting I lie to the council? Virelia asked. I'm suggesting you protect your family, Tharian said, the way you always have. Virelia stared at him, her mind racing. It was dangerous, reckless, impossible, and yet... Why would he even agree? She asked. I dismissed him, I humiliated him. Because, Tharian said, men like him don't walk away from children who need them, even when they should. Virelia closed her eyes. She thought of her daughters' faces, their laughter, the way they had looked at Ethan, not with duty but with love. And she thought of the way Ethan had knelt on that floor, surrounded by feathers, surrendering to their joy. Bring him to me, she said quietly. Tonight. Tharian nodded and left. Virelia stood alone once more, staring out at the moons. And for the first time in years, she prayed that she was making the right choice. 30 minutes later, Ethan stood in the observatory, flanked by 2 guards. He looked exhausted. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes shadowed. But when he saw Virelia, he straightened. Your Majesty, he said quietly. Virelia dismissed the guards with a wave. They hesitated, then left. She turned to face him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. I was wrong, Virelia said finally. Ethan blinked. Your Majesty. I was wrong to dismiss you, she continued, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. My daughters need you, and I... She hesitated. I cannot be what they need. Not right now. Ethan's throat tightened. I never wanted to replace you. I know, Virelia said softly, but that doesn't make it hurt any less. She stepped closer, her wings folding tightly against her back. I am offering you a position, she said. Officially, you will remain a janitor, but unofficially, you will be my daughter's caretaker, their tutor, their... She struggled with the word. Their friend. Ethan stared at her. Why? Because they love you, Virelia said simply, and because I cannot give them what you can. And what's that? Ethan asked. Time, Virelia whispered. Presence, joy. Ethan's eyes softened. Your Majesty, you're their mother. They don't need me. They need you. They need both of us, Virelia said. And I am asking you, no, I am begging you to stay. Ethan looked down at his hands. Then he nodded. I'll stay, he said quietly, but only if you promise me something. What? That you'll stop blaming yourself, Ethan said. You're doing the best you can, and your daughters see that. They love you, Your Majesty, more than you know. Virelia's breath hitched, and for the first time in years, she let herself cry. Ethan stood silently, giving her space, giving her dignity, and when she finally looked up, her eyes were clear. Thank you, she whispered. Ethan nodded. We'll figure this out, together. Virelia smiled faintly. Together. But as Ethan left the observatory, neither of them noticed the shadow in the hallway. A council member who had heard every word. For 2 weeks, an uneasy peace settled over the palace. Ethan continued his work with the Triplets, officially listed as maintenance staff, but spending most of his time in the residential wing. He taught them basic engineering, answered endless questions about Earth, and showed them how to build simple machines from spare parts he salvaged from the workshops. Lyra had a natural talent for mechanics. Kira loved puzzles and codes, and Ceres, quiet and observant, had begun asking questions about space navigation that surprised even Ethan. They were brilliant, all 3 of them, and they were starving for attention. Virelia watched from a distance, attending council meetings, managing diplomatic crises, and trying to ignore the cold stares from certain members of her court. She knew something was coming. She could feel it in the way Councillor Dreven's eyes followed her through the hallways, in the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. But she had made her choice, and she would defend it. The breaking point came on a cold morning, 14 days after Ethan's reinstatement. Tharion entered Virelia's private office, his face grim. "Your Majesty," he said, "we have a problem." Virelia looked up from the trade agreement she'd been reviewing. "What kind of problem?" "The Council has called an emergency session," Tharion said. "They're demanding your presence in 1 hour." Virelia's stomach dropped. "On what grounds?" "Violation of security protocols," Tharion said quietly. "Unauthorized personnel in royal quarters, failure to disclose changes in household staff to the Oversight Committee." "They're going after Ethan," Virelia said. "They're going after both of you," Tharion corrected. "Draven has been building a case for weeks. He has testimony from guards, surveillance footage, and—" He hesitated. "A petition signed by 8 council members calling for a formal inquiry into your fitness to rule." Virelia's claws scraped against the desk. "He's trying to remove me." "He's trying to force your hand," Tharion said. "If you defend Ethan, you look weak. If you dismiss him, you prove Draven right, that you're incapable of making sound decisions without outside pressure." "It's a trap," Virelia whispered. "Yes," Tharion said. "And you're walking into it in 58 minutes. Virelia stood, her wings spreading instinctively. "Then I'd better be ready." Ethan was in the Triplets' room when Tharion found him. The girls were working on a small hovering drone they'd built from scraps, arguing cheerfully about thrust ratios and power distribution. Ethan was laughing at something Kira had said when the door opened. Tharion's expression told him everything he needed to know. "The Council?" Ethan asked. "Emergency session," Tharion confirmed. "You're being summoned." The Triplets looked up, their faces falling. "What does that mean?" Lyra asked. "It means some people want to talk to Ethan," Tharion said carefully. "Important people." "Are they going to make him leave?" Ceres whispered. Tharion crouched down, meeting her eyes. "Not if we can help it." Kira grabbed Ethan's hand. "Don't go." Ethan knelt beside her. "I have to, but I promise you, no matter what happens in that room, I'm not giving up on you, any of you." "Promise?" Lyra asked, her voice breaking. "Promise," Ethan said. He stood and followed Tharion into the corridor. As they walked toward the council chamber, Tharion spoke quietly. "Draven's going to try to make you look like a threat," he said. "A spy, an opportunist, maybe even something worse. Don't let him bait you. Stay calm. Answer only what's asked. And whatever you do, don't..." "Don't what?" Ethan asked. "Don't admit you love them," Tharion said. "Because if you do, Draven will twist it into something ugly, and Virelia won't be able to protect you." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What if it's the truth?" "Then keep it to yourself," Tharion said. "For their sake." They reached the chamber doors. Inside, Ethan could hear voices, angry, overlapping, demanding. Tharion placed a hand on his shoulder. "Good luck," he said. The doors opened, and Ethan walked into the storm. The Grand Council chamber was exactly as cold and imposing as Ethan remembered. 12 council members sat in their elevated seats, looking down at him like judges at a trial. Virelia stood to the side, her posture rigid, her wings folded tightly. Councillor Draven rose, his silver scales gleaming under the chamber lights. "Ethan Cole," he began, his voice echoing through the space. "You stand before this council accused of serious violations. Do you understand the charges?" "I understand you don't like me," Ethan said evenly. A ripple of shock moved through the council. Draven's eyes narrowed. "This is not about personal preference. This is about security, about protocol, about the integrity of the royal household." "Then let's talk about integrity," Ethan said. "I was hired legally. I followed every rule in my contract. And when the Queen asked me to help with her daughters, I did what any decent person would do. I said yes. You were asked to clean, another counselor interjected, not to raise royal heirs. I wasn't raising them, Ethan said. I was spending time with them. There's a difference. Is there? Draven asked, stepping forward. Because from what I've seen, you've inserted yourself into every aspect of their lives. You've become a fixture in their daily routine. You've made yourself indispensable. Tell me, what exactly do you gain from this arrangement? Nothing, Ethan said. Nothing? Draven's voice dripped with skepticism. A human janitor, alone on an alien world, befriends the daughters of the most powerful woman in the system, and you expect us to believe you want nothing in return. I expect you to believe the truth, Ethan said, but I'm starting to think you're not interested in that. Virelia stepped forward. Counselor Draven, this interrogation is unnecessary. With respect, Your Majesty, it is entirely necessary, Draven said. This human has access to your children, to royal quarters, to information that could compromise planetary security, and we have no idea what his true intentions are. His intentions, Virelia said coldly, are to care for 3 lonely children who were being ignored by everyone in this palace, including this council. The chamber went silent. Draven's expression hardened. Your Majesty, your emotional attachment to this situation is clouding your judgment. My judgment is clear, Virelia interrupted. Clearer than it's been in years. And what I see is a council more interested in maintaining power than in the well-being of this family. We are interested in maintaining order, Draven said. And this situation, this arrangement, is creating chaos. The staff is divided. The guards are questioning their protocols. And the public, he paused. The public is beginning to ask questions. What kind of questions? Ethan asked. Draven turned to him. Questions about why a human is being allowed such unprecedented access. Questions about whether our queen values her own species. Questions about, he leaned forward, whether you and Her Majesty have formed an inappropriate relationship. Virelia's wings flared. How dare you? I dare because it's my duty, Draven said. And if you cannot see how this looks, then perhaps you truly are unfit to rule. The words hung in the air like poison. Ethan felt something snap inside him. You want to know what's inappropriate? He said, his voice cutting through the tension. What's inappropriate is a council that's so obsessed with protocol that they've forgotten those 3 girls are children. Not heirs, not symbols, children. They cry when they're sad. They laugh when they're happy. And they've been desperate for someone, anyone, to see them as more than political assets. You think we don't care about them? Another counselor demanded. I think you care about what they represent, Ethan said. Not who they are. And you do? Draven asked mockingly. Yes, Ethan said simply. I do. Draven smiled coldly. Then answer me this, human. If you care so much, why did you come to this planet in the first place? What were you running from? Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. I was running from the memory of my daughter's funeral, he said quietly. From the empty house I couldn't stand to live in anymore. From a life that stopped making sense the day she died. The chamber went still. I came here because I had nowhere else to go, Ethan continued, his voice raw. And I stayed because for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I had a reason to wake up in the morning. Not because of politics, not because of ambition, because 3 little girls looked at me like I mattered. Virelia's eyes were wet. Draven's expression didn't change. A touching story. But it doesn't change the facts. You are a security risk. You are a political liability, and your presence here undermines the authority of this throne. Then remove me, Ethan said. But do it because I've actually done something wrong, not because you're afraid of what it means that a human can love Draconite children as much as any of you could, if you bothered to try." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Councillor Sithara, who had been silent until now, spoke. "I move that we table this discussion," she said quietly, "until we have more information." Dreven turned to her sharply. "Councillor, I second the motion," another member said, then another. Dreven's face darkened with fury, but the vote passed. The session was adjourned. As the councillors filed out, Dreven approached Virelia, his voice low and dangerous. "This isn't over," he said, "not even close." "I know," Virelia replied, "but neither am I." Dreven left. Virelia turned to Ethan, her expression unreadable. "You should have stayed quiet," she said. "I know," Ethan said. "You made an enemy today," she continued. "A powerful one." "I know," Ethan repeated. Virelia stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Thank you," she said. Ethan met her eyes. "For what?" "For fighting," she said. "For them, for us." Ethan nodded. And as they walked out of the chamber together, neither of them saw the guard in the shadows, a guard whose loyalty belonged to Dreven, and who had recorded every word. The leaked recording hit the public networks 3 days later. It was everywhere. Ethan's voice, raw and emotional, admitting he cared about the triplets, Virelia defending him, Dreven's accusations about inappropriate relationships, the entire confrontation, edited and framed to make it look like a scandal. The headlines were brutal. Human janitor infiltrates royal family. Queen Virelia's judgment questioned. Is Earth trying to control Drakara through manipulation? Ethan's quarters were placed under guard. He was forbidden from seeing the triplets, and Virelia was summoned to an emergency public hearing, one that would be broadcast across the entire planet. The palace descended into chaos. Protesters gathered outside the gates. Some supported Virelia, others demanded Ethan's immediate deportation. The council was split down the middle, and the military command was making quiet inquiries about contingency protocols. Drakara Prime was on the edge of a political crisis, and at the center of it all were 3 terrified little girls who didn't understand why the man they loved had been taken away. The night before the hearing, Virelia stood in her daughter's room watching them sleep. They had cried for hours, refused to eat, refused to speak to anyone but her. Lyra had asked over and over, "Is Ethan coming back?" And Virelia hadn't known what to say. She heard footsteps behind her. Tharion entered quietly. "The hearing starts in 10 hours, he said. "Dreven's bringing witnesses. Media coverage is wall to wall, and..." He hesitated. "Ambassador Tarek from the Viridian Coalition has requested permission to attend." Virelia turned. "Why?" "He says it's a matter of human rights," Tharion said. "If Ethan is deported without cause, it could violate interspecies labor agreements. The Coalition is threatening sanctions." Virelia closed her eyes. "This is spiraling." "It's exactly what Dreven wanted," Tharion said. "Chaos, division, a weakened throne." "What do I do?" Virelia whispered. Tharion looked at the sleeping children, then back at her. "You fight," he said simply, "the way you always have." The public hearing was held in the Great Assembly Hall, a vast amphitheater that could hold thousands. Every seat was filled, cameras lined the walls, and at the center of it all stood Virelia, alone, facing a panel of 12 judges, half council members, half appointed magistrates. Dreven sat among them, his expression calm and controlled. Ethan stood in a holding area to the side, flanked by guards. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were clear. Ambassador Tarek sat in the diplomatic section, his presence a silent challenge. The head magistrate, an elderly Draconite named Vorin, called the hearing to order. This assembly has been convened to address allegations of misconduct, security violations, and potential abuse of power by Her Majesty Queen Virelia, he announced. We will hear testimony, review evidence, and render a decision on the following questions. Did Her Majesty violate established protocols? Did the human, Ethan Cole, pose a security risk? And is Her Majesty fit to continue her rule? The crowd murmured. Virelia stood tall, her wings folded, her expression serene. Dreven rose to present his case. He was methodical, persuasive. He presented surveillance footage of Ethan in restricted areas, testimonies from guards who claimed he'd asked suspicious questions, financial records showing his contract had been altered without council approval. He painted a picture of a man who had manipulated his way into the royal family for unknown purposes, and a queen too emotionally compromised to see the danger. When he finished, the crowd was silent. Vorin turned to Virelia. Your Majesty, you may respond. Virelia stepped forward. I will not deny the facts Councillor Dreven has presented, she said calmly. Ethan Cole did enter restricted areas. He did spend time with my daughters, and I did authorize changes to his contract without full council approval. The crowd stirred. But let me tell you what Councillor Dreven did not mention. Virelia continued, her voice rising. He did not mention that my daughters were isolated, lonely, and emotionally neglected. He did not mention that I have been ruling alone for 5 years, with no partner, no support, and no acknowledgement from this council of the impossible weight I carry. He did not mention that Ethan Cole asked for nothing in return for his kindness. And he did not mention, her voice cracked, that my daughters are happy for the first time in their lives. She turned to face Dreven directly. You want to know if I violated protocol? Yes, I did. Because sometimes protocol is wrong. You want to know if I'm fit to rule? Ask my people, ask my daughters, ask anyone who isn't more interested in maintaining control than in creating a world worth living in. The crowd erupted, some in applause, some in outrage. Vorin called for order. Dreven stood again. Your Majesty's passion is noted, but passion is not a defense. The question remains, why this human? Why risk everything for someone so, he paused, insignificant? Before Virelia could answer, a voice rang out from the side of the hall. Because he's not insignificant. Everyone turned. Ambassador Tarek had risen to his feet. Ambassador, this is not your forum, Vorin said. With respect, Magistrate, it is, Tarek replied, producing a datapad. I have just received authorization from the Viridian Coalition to intervene in this matter on the grounds of species-based discrimination. Dreven's face darkened. This is an internal matter. It stopped being internal the moment you made it about his species, Tarek interrupted. You've called him insignificant, a security risk, an outsider. But what you really mean is that he's human, and that is unacceptable. He walked into the center of the hall. Ethan Cole is a citizen of Earth, operating under a legal contract, approved by your own employment office. He has committed no crime. He has violated no law. And yet you are putting him on trial for the crime of being kind to children who needed him. Tarek turned to the crowd. If this hearing results in his deportation, the Viridian Coalition will impose immediate trade sanctions on Drakara Prime. We will freeze diplomatic relations, and we will file formal charges of xenophobia with the Galactic Council. The hall exploded into chaos. Dreven shot to his feet. You cannot. I already have, Tarek said. The documents have been filed. The sanctions are drafted. All that remains is your decision. Vorin slammed his gavel. Order. Order in this hall. The noise gradually subsided. Vorin looked at Tarek, then at Virelia, then at Ethan. This hearing is adjourned for deliberation, he said. We will reconvene in 1 hour with a verdict. As the judges filed out, Virelia caught Ethan's eye across the hall. He nodded once, and she knew, whatever the verdict, they had already won something far more important. They had told the truth. The hour of deliberation felt like days. Virelia waited in a private chamber adjacent to the assembly hall, pacing like a caged animal. Tharion stood by the door, arms crossed, silent. "What do you think they'll decide?" Virelia asked. "I think Tarek just changed the entire equation," Tharion said. "Draven wanted to isolate you, make this about your judgment. But now it's about Dracara's reputation on the Galactic stage. So they'll rule in our favor out of fear," Virelia said bitterly. "Not because it's right." "Does it matter?" Tharion asked. "If Ethan gets to stay?" Virelia stopped pacing. "It matters if my daughters grow up thinking power is all that counts." "Then teach them otherwise," Tharion said, "the way you've been doing." Before Virelia could respond, the door opened. A court attendant entered. "Your Majesty, the judges are ready." The assembly hall was silent as everyone returned to their seats. Vorin stood at the center of the judicial panel, holding a formal decree. After careful deliberation, he began, "This court has reached the following conclusions." The crowd held its breath. First, Ethan Cole has committed no crime under Dracaran law. His employment contract was valid. His interactions with the royal family, while unconventional, were authorized by the reigning monarch. A ripple of relief moved through half the crowd. Second, Queen Virelia did bypass certain protocols in authorizing Mr. Cole's expanded role. However, given the unique circumstances of her position, ruling alone while raising heirs, this court finds that her actions were within her discretionary authority as monarch. Virelia's shoulders sagged slightly. Third, this court finds no evidence of security risk, foreign manipulation, or inappropriate conduct by either party. Draven's expression was stone. Therefore, Vorin continued, Ethan Cole is cleared of all charges and may remain on Dracara Prime under his current employment terms. Queen Virelia's authority is affirmed, and this matter is considered closed. The hall erupted. Half the crowd cheered, the other half sat in stunned silence. Virelia closed her eyes, exhaling for what felt like the first time in hours. Across the hall, Ethan's guards removed his restraints. He stood, looking at Virelia. She smiled. And for a moment, everything else faded away. But as the crowd began to disperse, Draven approached Virelia, his voice low and venomous. You may have won today, he said quietly. But this is far from over. You've made enemies, Your Majesty, powerful ones, and they will not forget. Virelia met his gaze evenly. Neither will I. Draven turned and left. Tharion appeared at Virelia's side. He's not going to let this go. I know, Virelia said. But for now, we've bought time. She walked across the hall to where Ethan stood, still surrounded by guards and onlookers. Ethan, she said quietly. He turned to her. Your Majesty, come with me, she said. There are 3 little girls who've been waiting very impatiently to see you. Ethan's face broke into the first genuine smile she'd seen in days. Lead the way, he said. When they reached the residential wing, the triplets were sitting on the floor of their room, listless and quiet. But the moment the door opened and they saw Ethan, everything changed. Ethan! Lyra shrieked, launching herself at him. Kira and Ceres followed a split second later, all 3 of them crashing into him in a tangle of wings, arms, and tears. Ethan dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around all 3 of them. I'm here, he said, his voice thick. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Ceres whispered. Promise, Ethan said. Virelia watched from the doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Tharion appeared beside her. You did good, he said quietly. We all did. Virelia replied. And for the first time in weeks, the palace felt like home. But that night, as Virelia stood in her private observatory looking out at the stars, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was still ahead. Dreven had lost today, but men like him never accepted defeat. They waited, they planned, and they struck when you least expected it. Virelia's claws dug into the railing. "Let him come," she whispered to the empty room. "I'll be ready." The weeks following the hearing were tense but transformative. Dreven resigned from the council, citing irreconcilable differences with the current administration. 3 of his closest allies followed, but others remained, and the council restructured under new leadership, councillors who believed that tradition should serve the people, not imprison them. Public opinion shifted dramatically after the hearing. The footage of Ethan reuniting with the triplets went viral across the planet. Messages of support flooded the palace, and slowly, the rigid walls between species began to crack. New laws were passed protecting non-Draconite workers. Trade agreements with the Viridian Coalition strengthened, and for the first time in decades, the palace felt less like a fortress and more like a home. 6 months later, Ethan stood in the triplets' room, watching as they practiced their flight maneuvers. They had grown, not just physically, but in confidence, curiosity, and joy. Lyra executed a perfect barrel roll, landing with a flourish. "Did you see that?" she demanded. "Show off," Kira muttered, but she was grinning. Ceres flew more carefully, her movements precise and controlled. When she landed, she looked at Ethan. "How was that?" "Perfect," Ethan said. "All of you." Virelia entered, carrying a data slate. "You're officially no longer a janitor," she said, a small smile on her lips. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What am I now?" "Royal tutor, head of cultural education, and..." She hesitated. "Family." Ethan's throat tightened. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Virelia said softly. "You've already done enough." She stepped closer, her wings folding gently. "I was wrong about you," she admitted. "I thought you were a threat, but you were the answer." "I'm just a guy who fixed some toys," Ethan said. "No," Virelia said, her eyes glistening. "You fixed us." For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between them. Then Lyra called out, "Ethan! Mama! Watch this!" They turned just in time to see her execute a perfect spiral in midair, her sisters cheering below. Ethan laughed. "She's getting good." "They all are," Virelia said. "Because of you." Ethan shook his head. "Because of all of us." Virelia smiled, a real smile, soft and genuine, and as the triplets laughed and flew and played, Ethan realized something he hadn't felt in years. He was home. In the months that followed, the story of the human janitor who stood up to the Celestian Council became legend across Dracara Prime. Children whispered about it in schoolyards. Diplomats referenced it in negotiations, and slowly, quietly, the rigid walls between species began to crack. But for Lyra, Kira, and Ceres, still young, still learning, still growing, the story was much simpler. It was the story of a man who showed up when no one else did. A man who taught them that strength was not about power, but about presence. And a man who proved that family was not defined by blood, but by the choice to stay. Ethan Cole never sought recognition. He never asked for titles or honors. But he gave 3 little girls something far more valuable. He gave them a childhood. And in doing so, he reminded an entire world that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with weapons or speeches, but with a pillow fight in a room full of feathers. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments what rating from 0 to 10 you'd give it. And thank you for watching until the very end. In a universe built on tradition and power, sometimes all it takes to shift the stars is one person who refuses to walk away.